Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. Today on Minute Masterpiece we are tackling One Piece's Egghead Island arc and deciding on whether it is indeed the pinnacle of the series or if it's a little bit more middle of the pack. So without further ado, let's get on into it.
We're gonna have some fun! You guys just bounce back no matter what I do, right? I'm bouncing back from the end of the world!
Now, of course, as for the categories for this review, we've got 5 of them for you. We've got the beginning category, which is out of 3 points. We've got the characters category, which is out of 6 points. That's going to be divided up into the main character, the side characters, and the antagonists/villains. Then we have the story section, which is out of 4 points. We have the world building section, which is out of 4 points. And then we have the ending category that's going to be out of 3. Now, as for why it's out of 20 points, because... So without further ado, let's get on into the beginning and talk about the fruit salad that makes any series great. A hook, a premise, and is it interesting? So as for the hook, you have 2 main ones here. You have Bonnie being in the weird water bubble thing with the cool robot mech animal things, and Vegapunk getting revealed, who is indeed a woman. And also you have the stuff with Sabo where he's getting blasted off of existence from Emu, who's upset with him. Why, you may ask? Because Sabo saw the empty throne with King Cobra, and Emu was like, dude, why are you spilling my secrets? And then he decided to try and eradicate an entire island to kill Sabo. And of course, Sabo, because you didn't see a body, he's okay. The premise, the Straw Hats and Bonnie wind up on Egghead. While they're there, they're pursued by the world government, starting with Lucci. Then we got Kizaru, then we got the 5 elders, and there's also kind of a snake on the island who's betraying the heroes and making all the systems mess up so that the evil people can get in there and try to capture them, right? I think the premise is very good. I overall like the idea of finally getting to see Egghead because it's kind of been hyped up a lot, the future island. I always wanted to see where Vegapunk called home, and it certainly didn't disappoint. Now, is it very interesting? Yes! One Piece islands are like Pokemon cards to a scalper to me. I just can't get enough of that stuff, and I'm always excited to see a new one, and I think most people are as well. So overall, I think the beginning category gets an easy 3 out of 3. As for the main character, here we can say it on 3. Goku! No, it's obviously Luffy. It's Luffy. It's Luffy. I have the card too, so that's why I'm an authority on this subject, specifically with the Egghead Island arc. What I say is law. He's always a clear standout in any arc, and it is no different here, as he has a lot of screen time to kind of show off how much more of a threat he is now that he is officially in the 4 Emperors category with a 3 billion berry bounty, and he has the 2 frauds, Law and Kid, who are with him in that 3 billion berry bounty category. As for why they are frauds, they get immediately spawn camped by Shanks and Blackbeard and think they can fight when 1, their crew is basically useless, and 2, they needed to double up to beat Big Mom, and they thought, yeah, we got this, boys. We can beat Blackbeard and Shanks without backup. This will be fine. It's also interesting because this is Luffy's first arc with just having Gear 5 as an option right off the bat. So, of course, he's going to be beating up Lucci, which he does pretty much off the bat. He beats up Kizaru, which, you know, some people will say, oh, Carter. He fed Luffy the food later after he was beaten by him, and therefore Luffy could go on to defeat the 5 elders. Now, some of you just clearly not using your brains. So, Kizaru, why does Luffy not knock him off right off the front? First off, speed of light, right? That's tricky, okay? He's not stronger, he's simply more like a fly, buzzing around. And Luffy, he understands that that fly is very deadly to his crew. So what does he do? Stalls him smartly and makes sure not to give a killing blow because obviously Kizaru is going to be the food supply later, as he's a pretty nice guy. Now, that is all big brain Luffy plays, and obviously, if you didn't pick up on that within the story, I understand. It's pretty hard to understand the inner machinations of his mind, as he is, indeed, a genius, much like Vegapunk in the story. While he's not necessarily the emotional crux of the story this time around, not going to be like your Marineford, your whole cakes, even kind of Wano to an extent, because he was kind of the whole savior bit going on there. He is still a pinnacle of what a main character should be, and overall I think he deserves the 2 out of 2 for this arc as well. Now, as for the side characters, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Zoro and Sanji for a moment. Toei, what the heck, alright? I understand that you have to pad time because you don't want to catch up to Oda, but like, what were you doing with these 2? Zoro, he's your golden child, and he needs those aura moments. I understand. You watch Solo Leveling, you watch Jujutsu Kaisen, and you were like, oh my god, they have Gojo and Sun Jin Woo. How do we compete? We're just gonna do it with Zoro, right? But what happens when you do it with Zoro sometimes is you make him sit on his stupid 2-sword thing for like 50 years, and then he looks weaker than he actually is. And by the time he realizes that he has his 3rd sword again and does the whole like bandana, I'm gonna actually try, he immediately claps Lucci. But why was he fighting him for 2 swords that long? It doesn't make sense. And in the manga, it's like way shorter too. Anyways, I think that's kind of questionable. Now, as for Sanji, why is he barking now? In what universe did somebody approve that in the anime board? And also, why is he just so much more down bad all the time? And why is he losing to S-Shark? There are a lot of questionable decisions with Sanji's character in this arc. As for the whole thing with Bonnie, first off, he has kind of like a sensor that Oda describes where he understands something's up with Bonnie and so he doesn't flirt with her. And in the anime, they decided to just disregard this. And then the whole thing gets revealed where, like, Bonnie's actually 12, and then everybody in the anime was like, oh my god, let's cancel Sanji. So first up, if you are one of those anime fans, go back to your Solo Leveling. Get out of One Piece. And 2, what were you doing, Toei? Anyways, I do think still that Zoro and Sanji are clear standouts in this arc. It's basically they get a lot of time to show off kind of how far they've come, even though for some reason in S-Shark's case, Sanji like starts to lose that fight and then needs Nami. But he still gets to kick Venus Joro in the jaw, and Zoro can obviously fight the 5 elders as well. Now, as for the other Straw Hats, Frankie, he just like went to go get milk or something. I don't know where he was during this arc. He was running like a taxi service where he was saving people in the bubble car, and then he was like running off doing other things, trying to get the Sunny ready, and then Brooke was like sipping tea on the ship the whole time, and it was a whole thing, right? And I understand that necessarily in this arc, do they all need to have kind of big character moments? No, because it's a transitional story arc and you need other things to be going on. Specifically, you need to build up Kuma and Bonnie, because they're the main point of this one. You need the elders to get enough screen time, and you kind of need setup for Elbaf, right? I understand that, but like, Could we get something, maybe? Something of substance for the other Straw Hats? It would be kind of nice. Now, as for the Vegapunks, I think it's really interesting how they all kind of share the same brain up in the Labo phase. I do think that they are all very cardboard cutout-y. Do they need to be explained more than the Stella? No, except for Lilith and York, because, well, Lilith is the one who's made it off with the Straw Hats, so I really do hope we get something more on her instead of her just kind of being Scientist the character. And as for York, she was kind of the twist villain, if you can really even call her a twist villain, because basically it was like, oh, which of these people is not like the other? It's probably the one that's always sleeping and you don't know where they are. I do think her motivation makes sense from the standpoint of, like, if you're a very slothful individual, what do you want that exudes that life? Probably being a celestial dragon. But it just kind of feels like Doflamingo if he was stupid and lazy, because at least in York's case, she's just assuming that the other Vegapunks would never figure out, and also that she would somehow get away with it. And so, I don't know. I thought it was a bit strange. Now, as for the Bonnie and Kuma part of the story, pretty much the entire emotional plot point of this arc, and you get to kind of see Kuma throughout all stages of his life. The beginning really sucks. Kind of the whole thing sucks, except for the parts where you get to see him and Bonnie together, and it's very nice, like father-daughter time, and I like that. And also there's kind of interesting parts within it where you get to see different scenes throughout the story in a new perspective. Particularly, you get to watch Luffy training in the woods and Kuma was there, which is interesting. You also get to see the Sabaody sequence all over again from Kuma's perspective, where he just basically says, you guys are not ready for the new world, and he kind of sends them all away to the perfect training destination for them, which was very nice. Very nice flight on Kuma Air. Overall, I really enjoyed those pieces as well. I think it's great to make Bonnie kind of a real character, whereas a lot of the Worst Generation were kind of getting more and more character development. She was one of the ones left over there with Mad Monk Rouge, whatever his name is, where they just kind of felt like they weren't really characters. as much as the other ones. I think another part of the story that is sad here in particular is, one, the fact that since Kuma gave up his mind and his body and eventually makes the pacifistas, it turns into a really cruel reminder for Bonnie just living life as a pirate, because these pacifistas will most likely be used against her to try and capture her, and they all look like her dad, right? So that's super messed up. And I also was really upset about the whole letter thing, where the freaking maid just never let any of Kuma's letters go through. So I really enjoyed the Kuma and Bonnie part of the story, and I think both of those characters got a huge boost in this arc, and it was certainly well deserved. Dory and Bragi show up. Did not know I needed that, but it was amazing. Also, it was great setup for the Elbaf Island arc as we go into it next. Now, I will say, a sleeper hit in the side characters category, and I'll talk more about it in the story section, is Kobe. Oh my god, he had an amazing character arc on Full of Lead. From being a more dynamic and a character with agency in the story, particularly on Full of Lead, trying to save the rest of the prisoners, being set up as the future of the Navy and kind of a morally just person, whereas Kuzan, another of Garp's apprentices, is somebody who has fallen short and become disillusioned with the world, and therefore I really am excited to see that grudge match later. So overall, I think the side characters get a crisp 1.5 out of 2, and that's just because what were my Straw Hats doing? And also, the Vegapunks are very cardboard cutouty, except for kind of the ones that actually matter. And overall, I think you could have done a little bit more with them. Now, as for the antagonists, we've got Lucci. Did not expect to see him again. I mean, I kind of knew it was coming because they basically kept showing him in the start of the chapter stuff, and he kind of had some story where he was still alive and working his way up in the world. And then you get to see how far Luffy's come because he just immediately one-taps Lucci. Now, going next, we have Kizaru. I think it's amazing to have him come back in this arc specifically because of the many different references to the Sabaody arc, and I was really excited to see him kind of fight Luffy in a way that did not feel like a one-way slaughter. Now, granted, do I think Kizaru is stronger than Luffy? No. Do I think the only reason he was in that fight was because his power is light and so it makes him hard to hit? Yes. I think basically if you took Luffy and Gear 5 and he actually was one trying to kill him from the start of the fight, I think it would have happened way sooner. And also, I don't think you can compare Kizaru in terms of strength to Luffy, especially after Luffy has now beaten Kaido. And whereas if you want to argue like Kaido was worn down the entire time he was fighting everybody, and then eventually Luffy beat him because he got the Gear 5 power-up, and then Kaido was already tired. That's fine, but you still gotta understand, like, Luffy versus Kaido now would be, at worst, a 50-50, and to me, Kizaru versus Kaido would be, at worst, a 0% lose rate for Kaido. I don't think he's ever losing to Kizaru, whereas I think he could lose to Luffy. So I do think that Luffy is stronger than Kizaru. Now, in particular, I do like how Kizaru is the one who eventually feeds Luffy to get him back into Gear 5, and I also like emotional turmoil with him, specifically going there to kill his best friend, and also going against Sentomaru, who is the uncle for Sentomaru, so that's a lot of complicated emotions there, on top of him killing his best friend in Vegapunk. Next, we're going to talk about the 5 Elders, and the most important one for this arc is going to be Saint Saturn, as he is the one who has the most to do with Kuma's backstory, sets him up to fail, tortures him there, and also dies at the end because he has failed Imu and allowed Luffy to get away. Now, I do think the 5 Elders are such a fascinating part of One Piece that I could honestly just do a episode completely on them. From their entrance to their designs, it was all perfect and exactly what I wanted for them. I really enjoyed how they kind of represent corrupt political leaders and puppets, and also are monsters themselves when they use their actual power. Some people would say that, oh, I don't like this because they're just big monster people, but I think kind of the meaning there, at least from what I gleaned, was that the people in the highest positions of power, especially if they are corrupt, are monsters, and the fact that they are no longer making decisions as a human, and they are no longer thinking about human life as it has any meaning, right? And I overall really enjoyed how they kind of embody that effect in both their powers and just overall their designs. Also, let's go! USA! We got a representative. We got Saint Jupiter, who is the giant sandworm. That was supposed to be based on Abe Lincoln, I believe. As for the others, I'll put them on screen here if I can find the stuff, but I did think it was fun that the US got a representative for the 5 elders. I really enjoyed that. Now, I also like that they are not very strong in the traditional sense, so this isn't going to be a situation of kind of power creep and power scaling failures within a shonen story, because while they are very durable and they kind of regenerate all the time, Zoro and Sanji were shown to be able to handle one, and Luffy can basically just make fun of all of them as long as he wants. Their true power lies in the fact of just their indestructibleness, not necessarily how strong they actually are. In my opinion, Kizaru would also be able to be a little bit stronger than one of the 5 elders. He just wouldn't have as much stamina as they do because they just don't die, right? So I was very excited about them. I think they are an amazing build-up to Emu and a very great commentary to have on politics that One Piece is already kind of doing. Spectacular. I will give them an easy 2 out of 2 for the antagonists. Now, as for the story section, it is a little bit of a transitional arc, but there is a lot to delve into. So, of course, I mentioned earlier you have the Kuma and Bonnie backstory. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think it sets up kind of Saturn in an amazing way. I think it sets up Vegapunk in an amazing way, and you understand exactly kind of the influence that he had in the worlds. Particularly, you also understand more of his influence through him and Kizaru's relationship, and also how he knows Dragon, and he was there for Ohara, or he was there after Ohara burned to the ground and everything. So you get a lot on exactly the ties that Vegapunk has to each different faction, and where kind of his true loyalty lies. Now, granted, I will say, he is a man of science first and foremost, but he also did uncover the secrets of the world in that projector speech where he essentially told everybody that there is a flooded world below the current One Piece world. I also enjoyed that because that explains why there is so much water in the One Piece world and there's only like that one band of continuous land. Even though Reverse Mountain still splits up the red line, I did enjoy the explanation there. Now, of course, you've also got the entire 5 elders kind of foreshadowing of Emu, and I really enjoyed that as well. I think that they don't disappoint. I also just really enjoyed how as soon as Emmett pulls his little hockey knot, which that's a thing that I didn't ever think One Piece would have, but it is cool, I guess. And so once Emmett pulls that hockey knot, they all get sent immediately back to where they were and are kind of afraid. And so I really did enjoy that subtle storytelling, particularly with that, because you understand that the 5 elders are afraid of Joy Boy being back into the world. And I really, really liked that. Now also, let's get into the best part of Egghead. Kobe. It's his time. His stocks have never been higher, quite frankly. I think Kobe's story could be broken down into different generations, kind of like how the differences between ideologies between kind of like boomers, millennials, and Gen Z kind of is within the world at large, and also Gen X thrown out in there as well. So as for how I will show this, of course I'm using that. Who do you think I am? Now, I have it kind of labeled out here in between Garp, Kuzan, and Kobe. So, as for Garp, he believes in maintaining the system. He is also the one who formed the current Navy system that's going on, as he is the hero of the Navy, and he is also shown to have a high value of maintaining it in the sense that he did not save Ace during Marineford, right? And that's kind of an action that represents his beliefs more so than anything else throughout the series. Now, as for why he would not save Ace and save Kobe, the exact reason is just because Ace was a pirate and Kobe was a Marine. In my opinion, there's nothing more so there other than just the fact that while Ace did matter a lot to him, he chose to value his form of justice over saving basically somebody who was like a son to him. Now, as for Kuzan, he is disillusioned with the system, right? He has joined the Blackbeard Pirates. He has decided to give up his Navy days, and he was a former supporter of burning justice, but once the Ohara incident happened, he decided to go to lazy justice, which is more so focusing on avoiding unnecessary bloodshed and kind of the belief that justice will eventually happen, and there's no need to kind of pursue it with a fervent passion with somebody like Sakazuki, right? He would just pursue you until you die. Kuzan's just kind of like, nah, let's do some mercy and let's kind of think about it their own way. Now, as for Kobe, he is about finding his own path, specifically within the Navy, and this is showcased by him joining Sword, whereas him not staying just a regular Marine. And why I think this is important more so than him kind of reforming the system. You could argue that he is trying to reform the system, but in my opinion, if he was trying to do that, he would not have joined Sword. Joining Sword specifically allows him to follow his own moral compass and allow him to make his own actions, therefore finding his own path. And he follows a very moral sense of justice. You can see this in his Marineford speech, where he is essentially standing up to one of the head of the Marines and saying, why are we still killing people? There's no point to this pointless bloodshed that's going on, right? Now, where this gets interesting is the fact that Garp trained both of these individuals. Kuzan eventually became disillusioned with the system, whereas Kobe has decided to stick with it, right? And pursue his goals and train harder in that route. Now, as for Kuzan, he was in a very similar sense of justice as Kobe, as particularly his lazy justice exercises mercy, avoids unnecessary bloodshed, and follows his own moral compass. Kobe is following his own moral compass and also is trying to prioritize saving lives over killing pirates, right? That's the difference. And both of these had a similar mindset at one point. Granted, Kuzan's changed. And between Garp and Kuzan, the fascinating thing about their fight to me was that Garp represents the system and Kuzan represents finding the system to be worthless. And in the end, Kuzan wins, right? He beats out Garp, whether it was a mercy fight from Garp or whether it was an actual win from Kuzan. And overall, that sets up a fight, in my mind, between Kuzan and Kobe, right? And Kobe not only represents the newest mentor for Garp, his favorite student, and also upholding the values of a Marine, but he also represents the old justice that Kuzan used to have, in a way. And so it's almost like Kuzan is not fighting his old mentor, but he's fighting an older version of himself as well, and someone who has come out the other side and has not been disillusioned with the system and is deciding to stick with the Marines. And so I find that part of the story utterly fascinating, and I'm so excited to see whenever that fight happens, and I really hope that Kuzan versus Kobe is everything that I want it to be and that it actually does happen. So overall, the story is a bit jerky at times, where you have a lot of action in some sequences, you have a lot of emotion in others, and there is kind of not a lot going on with the characters and their individual stories. I do think it is still a really great arc that sets up a ton and also does it in a very digestible way. But I do think it is a solid 3 out of 4 for the story section. I don't think it's the peak of One Piece, and I certainly don't think it's the peak of storytelling as well. So next up, we have the world building category, and I want to go ahead and talk about the Island AC, which I thought was a very fascinating concept to kind of have in controlling tropical environments or very cold environments within the One Piece world. I also like their explanation for why it isn't distributed to the entire world at large, and this is just due to a lack of funding, as Vegapunk puts it, which I really enjoyed because it shows that the One Piece world is also very similar to the real world in some ways, where a lot of the reason some scientific advancements don't happen and don't benefit the whole world, also like the food vending machine, or just because there's not enough money there to support it. And, you know, the rest of the One Piece world is doomed to be like Europe without AC forever. As for some other stuff, we have the greater depth to what Joy Boy's story means in Bonnie and Kuma, and kind of the entire One Piece world at large, and understanding his cultural impact to a bunch of different civilizations. Now, I also will say a small piece of world building that I really enjoyed was how the 5 elders are depicted to have different powers than just a regular devil fruit. Now, granted, I'm assuming their monster form is just a regular, like, mythical mythical Zoan or whatever. But as for the teleportation and the regeneration, that is something that they have clearly gotten from Emu, and I thoroughly like that subtle bit of world building there. And now, while I do believe that the world building is not the best that the series has ever had, something like Whole Cake I believe has a lot more to sink your teeth into, I did thoroughly enjoy everything that Egghead Island had to offer, so I will still give it a solid 3 out of 4 for that category there. Now, as for the ending category, the Straw Hats escape Egghead, and with the help of Dory and Broggy and Emmett, they are on their way to Elbaf Island. They have experienced the true terror of some of the world government's strongest and best, and from here on out, they will have to find a way to deal with them. They even make some new friends in Lilith, Kuma, and Bonnie to join at least temporarily as they make their way to the land of the giants, and also Garp is captured, so elder abuse abound. I think the ending category gets an easy 3 out of 3 as it wraps up what was truly an explosive arc and a really fun time within the series. And also, bonus point alert, I'm going to give this out specifically because of the anime's adaptation and finally achieving that beautiful animation that I always knew One Piece was capable of, and I think it is truly represented most impactfully in the Egghead Island arc. In particular, my favorite sequence is when the 5 elders are summoned. I would love to hear what your favorite animation sequence of the One Piece anime was in the comments down below. And, of course, that makes our final score a wondrous 18.5 out of 20. So, did you think I was right on the money? Did you think I was a little off? I would love to hear your takes in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!